Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
Hello, and welcome to Novel Conversations, a podcast about the world's greatest stories. I'm your host, Frank Lavallo, and for each episode of Novel Conversations, I talk to two readers about one book. And together, we summarize the story for you. We introduce you to the characters, we tell you what happens to them, and we read from the book along the way. So if you love hearing a good story, you're in the right place. This episode's conversation is about the novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. And I'm joined by our Novel Conversations readers, Katie Porchile and Gregory James. Katie, Gregory, welcome.
Thanks for having us, Frank.
Glad to have you both here for this conversation. Before we get started, let me give you a quick introduction to today's novel. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a classic science fiction novel by French writer Jules Verne. The novel was originally serialized from March 1869 through June of 1870, and finally published in 1871. It tells the story of Captain Nemo and his submarine, the Nautilus, as seen from the perspective of Professor Pierre Aronnax after he, his servant Conseil, and Canadian whaler Ned Land wash up on the ship. On the Nautilus, the three embark on a journey which has them going 20,000 leagues around the world, under the sea. It is regarded as one of the premier science fiction adventure novels and one of Verne's greatest works, along with Around the World in 80 Days and Journey to the Center of the Earth. Its depiction of Captain Nemo's underwater ship, the Nautilus, is regarded as ahead of its time since it accurately describes many features of today's submarines, which in the 1860s were comparatively primitive vessels. The book itself is divided into two parts. Part one of the novel, consisting of 23 chapters, begins in the summer of 1866. Part two also takes place in 23 chapters, starting up 2 years later than part one in January of 1868. So, Katie, how does our story start?
It begins in the summer of 1866 when something enormous and mysterious is sighted at various locations on the ocean. This sea monster is treated as a tall tale at first, but when shipwrecks start to occur, Admiral Farragut of the U.S. Navy is sent on a mission to find the monster.
No one is sure if it's an animal or an object. It can travel at impossible speeds and shoot columns of water 150 feet in the air. At first, the object/animal is the subject of gossip, humor, and speculation. But when incidents happen that threaten passenger ships, any wreck or loss is blamed on the monster.
Admiral Farragut enlists the help of ocean expert Professor Pierre Aronnax of the Museum of Natural History in Paris, along with Aronnax's servant, Conseil. Farragut also enlists a master harpooner from Canada named Ned Land, who has an unparalleled eyesight and a quick hand.
Katie, tell us a little bit about Professor Aronnax.
Dr. Pierre Aronnax is the novel's principal narrator and assistant professor in the Museum of Natural History in Paris. He narrows the possible explanations of what the mystery could be to two: a colossal monster or an enormous submarine.
Aronnax is highly intelligent, curious, and well-educated. He appreciates the opportunity to observe oceans and their life all around the globe.
And Katie, what about Conseil?
Aronnax's servant and assistant, Conseil is the archetypal faithful servant who has risked his life to save his master. He remains calm, patient, and remarkably strong even in the face of death and despair, the embodiment of contemplative composure. He has traveled all over the world with Aronnax and is well versed in ocean species and habitats. Of the three captives, Conseil is the most patient and optimistic, sometimes seeming indifferent. He has a good sense of humor, too. Conseil means counsel in French.
You know, Katie, he reminds me of the character Passepartout, the manservant of Phileas Fogg from Verne's Around the World in 80 Days.
I was thinking the same thing.
And finally, what do we know about Ned Land? Gregory?
Land is the opposite of Conseil. He reacts with anger, suspicion, and a willingness to use violence if needed, the archetypical embodiment of brute masculinity. He's a classical male adventurer who loves harpooning meat and sailing the seas. Land can be hot-tempered and violent if he is challenged or insulted.
His surname becomes metaphorical since he will be the one who most longs for land. So, Katie, monster or submarine?
All major governments reject the idea that the mystery is a submarine, as the technology of a craft such as this seems too impossible. Aronnax writes an article in which he states the phenomenon could be a giant narwhal, a hypothesis that prompts the U.S. Navy to commission the Abraham Lincoln to pursue such a creature.
Farragut's ship, the Abraham Lincoln, is described as a well-armed frigate with a passionate crew and the presence of the world's finest harpooner, the Canadian Ned Land. Farragut has offered a reward to the first man to sight the monster.
Land and Aronnax develop a friendship because of their shared French heritage, and Land is the only crew member who doubts the existence of the monster because of the damage it did to the iron plates of the ship, Scotia.
True, but to Land's doubt, Aronnax argues that a creature who lives in the greatest ocean depths would require a structure of enormous proportions and strength to withstand the pressure. His points seem to sway Land's opinion.
The Abraham Lincoln sets off from New York City, and after searching the Atlantic, the frigate rounds Cape Horn and heads for the Pacific. There they find something.
Slowly, the frigate approaches a phosphoric phenomenon that Aronnax judges to be an electric narwhal. The ship and the monster zigzag through the waters all day and all night. In the morning fog, the monster surfaces and blows jets of steam high into the air. Farragut orders full steam as they pursue the monster, with Land poised and ready, harpoon in hand, but the frigate cannot overtake the monster.
The crew tries to shoot it, but the bullets bounce off. They fear they have lost it until they see the monster again and approach it while it appears to sleep. Land throws his harpoon and hits the monster, but it sounds and appears as though the harpoon hit a hard body.
Quickly, the monster's light goes out, and it sprays 2 enormous waterspouts at the frigate, creating a fearful shock, damaging its rudder and knocking Aronnax, Conseil, and Land into the ocean.
To conserve energy, they take turns swimming and holding up each other. Despairing and exhausted, they see the moon rise and spot the frigate about 5 miles away. They call out for help and soon hear a human voice respond.
Aronnax collapses and wakes up on a hard surface, with Land looking at him. The men are resting upon the exposed roof of a monster. When Land observes that the beast is covered in metal plates, Aronnax begins to understand that the monster is not a creature, but a man-made vessel.
In the morning, when the vessel begins to descend, Land stomps on the hull and a metal plate slides open. Soon, 8 masked men take Aronnax, Conseil, and Land into the submarine.
The captives try to communicate in French, English, German, and they even throw in some Latin, but they get no response from the men.
Aronnax, Conseil, and Land descend into darkness and confusion. Land is ready to fight, but Aronnax and Conseil argue for diplomacy and patience. The room is soon lit by a bright bulb, revealing a table and 5 stools. The door opens, and 2 men enter, the taller man clearly in charge.
Aronnax exquisitely describes the taller man as cool and confident, handsome and observant. Quote, certainly the most admirable specimen I had ever met. Significantly, the taller man, the character Aronnax believes to be in charge, is not described in negative terms at all. Although this man will soon take his place as the novel's antagonist, Aronnax's first impressions are admiring.
The 2 men speak an unknown language. Soon, the captors exit. Later, a steward appears with fresh clothes and sets the table for a meal. The food served is of exceptional quality, and each utensil and dish is engraved with the motto Mobilis in Mobili and the letter N. Aronnax, Conseil, and Land eat and soon fall asleep. The storytellers have not yet revealed the identity of N.
When the steward appeared with an elaborately served meal, the captives and us readers learn that the vessel is inhabited by wealthy men with refined taste. The engraving on the dishes likely reveals the initial of the person who commands the vessel, and the motto Mobilis Immobili means moving in a moving medium, which suggests the nature of their mysterious environment, a place that moves through a surrounding fluid.
Once the 3 prisoners wake after being captured and fed, Aronnax surmises, based on the sensation of not being able to breathe normally, that the vessel must rise to the surface to replenish the air inside as if to breathe, like a whale. He experiences a wave of fresh air immediately upon the vessel's rising.
When Land wakes, he is famished, but the steward does not come for a very long time. When Land loses his temper, Conseil and Aronnax try to pacify him. When the steward finally arrives with a meal, Land attacks him and tries to strangle him. A voice in French orders Land to be calm.
The second time this man appears, he introduces himself in French as Captain Nemo, the language he has pretended not to understand earlier.
He has taken his time deciding how to treat the captives. Nemo considers them enemies who are now prisoners of war, but he offers them a deal. He offers them total freedom on board the Nautilus, except for times that he will determine when they must remain in their cabins. However, they can never leave.
Such a deal.
The alternative, should they not agree to this offer, is that they will be put on a hull while the vessel descends and left to drown. Given the choice between life and death, Aronnax, Conseil, and Land reluctantly agree to remain on the vessel as captives. Nemo calls for a steward to take Land and Conseil to their quarters and invites Aronnax to follow him for a tour of the Nautilus.
All right, so Gregory, tell us a little bit about the Nautilus.
Sure. The vessel has an abundant library of books, art, and ocean specimens enticing to Aronnax. The crew prepares elaborate meals from sea products.
Nemo explains all the instruments and machinery on the Nautilus and how they function. Electricity runs the engines, the measurements, the lights, the clocks, the kitchen, and the drinking water.
All of this electricity is powered by minerals from seawater. The Nautilus can reach speeds of 150 miles an hour. They use a small fishing vessel as a fishing or pleasure boat.
Nemo shows Aronnax drawings that reveal the design of the Nautilus, a cigar-shaped cylinder 232 feet long and 26 feet wide, composed of 2 holes that give the vessel its strength. He explains how the submarine sinks and rises because of its reservoirs of water, pumped by powerful electric engines.
The Nautilus can be steered vertically and horizontally, and a powerful reflector lights the ocean for a half a mile. Nemo considers the Nautilus a perfect vessel and loves it as if it were a human. He describes its building, which parts from many countries assembled on a desert island by skilled workmen at a tremendous cost. He also indicates that the site of the construction was burned to eliminate all evidence. Nemo tells Aronnax that he is immensely rich.
Nemo shows him his library of 12,000 volumes, his collection of 30 works by art masters, sheet music of the world's greatest composers, and a remarkable collection of ocean specimens. They smoke cigars made from seaweed and share a sumptuous meal made entirely from sea products. Nemo even shows Aronnax his private quarters.
So Gregory, tell us a little bit more about Captain Nemo.
Meeting Captain Nemo is the dominant event in these chapters. In his own words, he is, quote, at once captain, builder, and engineer of an incredible ocean vessel that he considers perfect and loves as if it were part of myself. It is not yet clear whether this Nemo is friend or foe, and perhaps he's a little bit of both. He will continue to be an enigma, a man who, in his own words, has broken all ties with humanity. He has abandoned humanity entirely, including its laws and norms, but does not divulge his reasons for doing so.
The name Nemo is Latin for nobody, which shows Nemo's mysterious reluctance to reveal his past. Usually, he is confident and authoritative, but Nemo does give in to bouts of solitude. As Aronnax encounters the intricacies and miracles of the vessel and its captain, his thirst for knowledge overtakes his thirst for freedom. Despite being captor and captive, Nemo and Aronnax are becoming friends.
Readers, we probably should mention here that these chapters establish the fact that whatever challenges, successes, and failures this mission may hold, the narrator, Aronnax, will survive long enough to tell the tale. Aronnax is not telling the story as it happens in the present tense. He uses his journal to look back on events that he can recall, interpret, choose, and even exaggerate as he sees fit to serve the tale he tells. This approach doesn't necessarily mean that Aronnax is an unreliable narrator, but it does emphasize that he will be able to edit the narrative to serve his own needs. Okay, readers, with that start, let's take a break here, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation about the travels and adventures of the Nautilus and its crew. We'll be right back.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
Welcome back. You're listening to Novel Conversations. All right, readers, when we left, we introduced our main characters and started the Nautilus on its journey of 20,000 leagues. Chapter 13 begins with a geography lesson about the oceans, the enormous amount of water they contain, and the underwater rivers and currents that Nemo uses to travel. Nemo takes Aronnax to the vessel's platform after it has risen to determine their exact location, apparently near the coast of Japan.
When Land asks how many men are on the Nautilus, Nemo will not answer. When the lights go out inside the submarine, panels slide open to reveal windows that make the transparent sea and its abundant life visible, illuminated by the light outside.
Days pass without any sign of Nemo. From November 6th to the 19th, there's no sign of Captain Nemo at all. Aronnax spends his time studying the ship's specimens.
Eventually, Aronnax finds a note on his desk inviting him to participate in a hunting party the following day on the island of Crespo. They will hunt underwater while wearing underwater breathing and lighting suits. They will use special guns that use little power but kill any animal on contact.
Aronnax and Conseil agree to wear the heavy and impervious suits, but Land refuses. The others don their helmets, examine the guns, and enter a cabin that fills with water. Once the cabin is full of water, the men safely exit to the ocean floor, able to breathe and see.
After much walking, the men reach an underwater forest filled with large, motionless trees that grow straight upward. Beneath the trees are sea shrubs with fish that fly from branch to branch. After another long walk, the men grow drowsy and take a nap.
When they wake, Aronnax is faced with a terrifying giant sea spider, which Nemo kills with his gun.
In shallow waters, one of Nemo's men shoot an albatross flying above the surface. As they approach the Nautilus, Nemo and his companion knock Aronnax and Conseil to the ground to protect them from two large sharks. Soon, the hunting party members reach the Nautilus, enter and undress, hungry and weary.
The morning after their forest hunt, Aronnax goes to the platform where he sees Nemo and observes crew members hauling in nets. He observes that the crew are of many different nationalities, just as the nets contain many species of sea life. Much of this chapter describes myriad types of fish, testimony to the expertise and interests of the author.
One day, Conseil tells Aronnax to come see something. They observe several shipwrecks. They observe one vessel that had been sunk for only a few hours, with corpses bound by ropes. Among them are a mother and infant, members of the crew, and even the steersman. As sharks approach, the gruesome sight haunts the onlookers.
The next chapter begins on New Year's Day. Conseil wonders if they shall ever see home again, but also admits that, while on the Nautilus, they have seen wonders beyond belief. The Nautilus continues to the Torres Straits, north of Australia, and situated with dangerous coral reefs.
The weather is rough, and the Nautilus runs aground. The ship is not damaged, but it is stuck. Nemo intends to wait a few days for the full moon's high tides to release the vessel. Land and Conseil convince Aronnax to ask Nemo's permission to go out onto dry land while the vessel is grounded. Nemo surprisingly consents. Land is anxious to kill and eat some land meat, and the threesome take a boat to the island of Gilboa.
Aronnax, Conseil, and Land are more than happy to spend some time on dry land. On the first day, they gather and eat breadfruit, coconuts, bananas, and cabbage palms, but no meat. They return to the Nautilus and unload the food, but they see no one.
The next morning, they return to the island. They see many species of tropical birds, including a bird of paradise, and they hunt, kill, and cook several. Finally, in the afternoon, Land shoots a hog with an electric bullet and then several small kangaroos. The three men gather on the shore and cook a magnificent meal, musing about whether they should ever return to the Nautilus when a stone falls at their feet.
The men come face to face with the Papuans and retreat to the Nautilus. When Aronnax tells Nemo about the natives, the captain is unconcerned. The next morning, Aronnax goes to the platform and observes hundreds of natives gathered on the shore. He describes their various appearances and costumes.
The next day, when Nemo opens the hatch, natives storm the vessel and try to get inside. However, Nemo has cleverly set up an electrical cable on the stairs so that anyone who touches it is shocked. The Papuans retreat. The tide pushes the Nautilus out to the sea exactly as Nemo has planned, and the vessel continues its journey.
The Nautilus continues at full speed toward the Indian Ocean, and Aronnax wonders where Nemo is headed. On January 16th, the vessel floats calmly in the waters while the crew performs minor repairs. However, Aronnax realizes that they are in a dazzling phosphorescent bed in which he can observe sea life naturally illuminated.
2 days later, Aronnax observes Nemo and his lieutenant on the platform, looking toward the horizon through a telescope, agitated by what they see. When Aronnax fetches his own telescope and looks too, Nemo angrily pulls it away and commands that the three prisoners be confined to their cabins as they earlier agreed.
When Aronnax questions the reason, Nemo quickly ends the conversation. Aronnax, Conseil, and Land go to their cabins and eat breakfast, but soon realize that the food contains a soporific substance that puts them directly into a deep sleep.
The morning after their confinement, Nemo solemnly comes to Aronnax and asks if he is a medical doctor. When Aronnax replies that he is, Nemo takes him to a crew member who has been mortally wounded, his skull broken and brain partially exposed. Nemo evades telling Aronnax what happened, but Aronnax suspects the head wound is connected to the events of the previous day.
The man dies, and Nemo sheds tears for him. The next day, Aronnax, Conseil, and Land agree to go on another ocean floor excursion. After walking for hours, they reach a kingdom of marvelous corals, varied and gorgeous.
Members of the crew dig a grave equipped with a coral cross. They bury their fallen comrade and hold a funeral in his honor. Back on the submarine, Nemo remarks that the cemetery is safe from both sharks and men.
Nemo proposes an expedition to the Ceylon pearl fisheries. Nemo warns that they will likely encounter sharks, which frightens Aronnax, but he agrees to go anyway, and Conseil and Land agree to accompany them.
Aronnax explains pearls to Land, including their value, shape, size, types, and method of harvesting. When Aronnax brings up the sharks, Land is interested in harpooning them. Conseil is only interested in accompanying his master.
The pearl harvesting expedition begins at 4 a.m. The four men, Nemo, Aronnax, Conseil, and Land, go into the rowboat, which approaches the pearl bank as the sun rises. They put on their heavy diving suits and helmets, but Nemo explains that they will not need their lanterns because they will not dive deep. He adds that they will carry daggers instead of guns, and Land brings his harpoon.
At 7 a.m., they reach the vast oyster bed and follow Nemo to a deep grotto where he shows them an enormous oyster, weighing some 600 pounds. With his dagger, Nemo opens the oyster's shell to reveal a pearl the size of a coconut. When Aronnax reaches to touch it, Nemo stops him, revealing his intention to allow the giant pearl to continue to grow.
Soon, they spot an Indian diver attached to a canoe, but the diver does not see them. The diver reacts to an approaching shark, which stuns him with its tail fin and might have cut him in half if not for Nemo's advances.
The shark turns on Nemo instead, which turns into a terrible combat that threatens Nemo's life. Land saves Nemo by harpooning the shark. He finally got to kill something. Nemo carries the Indian back to his boat, revives him, and hands him a bag of pearls.
Nemo and Aronnax discuss the dangers of the Red Sea, recorded by the ancients. Nemo describes the ancients' view of these seas and their commercial value in connecting parts of the world.
When Nemo suggests that they will be in the Mediterranean in 2 days, Aronnax thinks it's impossible, for the Suez Canal is not yet built, and the path to the Mediterranean is long. Nemo replies that there is a subterranean passage that he has named the Arabian Tunnel.
This is the first time I looked up to see if that was real. Before that, I hadn't looked up any information about the book.
Was it?
It's not.
Not real, okay.
It's impossible.
Like the Northwest Passage.
Yeah. Yep. The Nautilus is floating in the Red Sea. Land and Aronnax see a dugong, an animal like a manatee, that Land wants to, surprise, surprise, harpoon. Nemo grants permission, but he warns that dugongs sometimes turn against their assailants, so Land should not miss. Land throws his harpoon at the dugong, but only wounds it. The enormous animal plunges, and they begin the chase. The animal nearly capsizes the smaller boat Land rides in, but Land delivers a mortal wound to its heart and wins the battle.
The Nautilus continues towards Suez, and they prepare to pass through the tunnel, steered by Nemo. The current is swift, and the tunnel walls are close. The sea roars as they move. Aronnax's heart beats fast. In less than 20 minutes, the Nautilus passes through the tunnel and enters the Mediterranean.
And now that they're back in the Mediterranean, Land wants to escape, but Aronnax feels no desire to leave Nemo and the journey. Aronnax argues that they might profit by waiting, perhaps 6 months or so.
Land says that Aronnax is talking about the future, but he is focused on the present. They discuss their differences and agree that Land needs to take advantage of a favorable opportunity if they are above water and close to shore.
Aronnax predicts that Nemo will never give them the chance, but that if Nemo does, he and Conseil will follow Land.
One night, Aronnax and Nemo are in the salon together, and Nemo opens the panels. As they observe the sea life, a living diver appears just outside the Nautilus. Nemo knows him. Nemo opens an iron chest, fills a strong box with ingots of gold worth nearly 2,000 pounds, and writes an address on the lid. 4 men carry the chest out of the salon, and Nemo bids Aronnax goodnight with absolutely no explanation of what has just happened.
It becomes clear to Aronnax that Nemo feels uneasy and cramped in this sea between Europe and Africa, and has lost his confident swagger. The vessel surfaces only when necessary and moves at 25 miles an hour, a speed too fast for land to attempt escape.
Tensions mount when Land announces his plan to escape while the Nautilus moves only a few miles from the Spanish coast. He has stocked and prepared the canoe. Aronnax tries to argue that the seas are rough, but Land says that they must take the risk, reminding Aronnax that he has given his word to follow Land's plan. Aronnax feels distraught at the thought of leaving the Nautilus and upsetting Nemo.
Aronnax observes the Nautilus's passage past a summit, noting the fish and geography along the way, and then sleeps. When he wakes, the Nautilus is floating, but everything is dark, and Aronnax is confused. Nemo explains that they are inside an extinct volcano, floating on a lake in its interior. His crew is extracting coal from the volcano's walls that will be used to make electricity they use, but they will only stay there one day. So, if the captives want to explore, they must do so immediately.
As Aronnax, Conseil, and Land walk up the inside walls of the volcano, rocks give way to shrubs and land plants, and they even see and smell some violets. Land spots a beehive and harvests some honey. He also throws rocks at land birds and kills one. They return to the Nautilus, which leaves port the following day.
For 19 days, until March 12th, the Nautilus traverses the Atlantic at a constant speed. During this time, Aronnax wonders if Nemo will ever release them. There is certainly no means of escape while they are here. Aronnax sees little of Nemo, and they spend much of their time on the surface. They have traveled about 13,000 leagues since they left the Pacific.
Nemo orders that the vessel descend to a great depth, where Aronnax observes the uninhabited parts of the ocean. Nemo takes a photograph and then orders that they ascend to protect the vessel from such enormous pressure. They rise very quickly, bursting onto the surface like a flying fish.
Land and Conseil question how many crewmen are on the Nautilus, and Aronnax calculates that a huge number could breathe with the air on board. Land is losing patience with his captivity. When he spots several whales, he becomes overwhelmed with the desire to hunt. When Land asks Nemo's permission, the captain refuses, claiming that it would be killing unnecessarily since they do not need whale oil.
When a group of cachalots, another kind of whale, appears, Nemo calls them terrible animals because they are predators headed for the unsuspecting whales. The Nautilus approaches the cachalots as they attack and begin to ram them, killing them for more than an hour. When the carnage is finished, the vessel surfaces and the men find a mass of cachalot bodies floating on the water.
At this point, Land accuses the captain of being a butcher and a hypocrite, but Nemo defends his actions. One whale that has been killed floats in the water. 2 crewmen draw gallons of milk from it, and Nemo offers Aronnax a drink. It tastes good. So let's take a break here, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation about Nemo, the Nautilus, and this amazing voyage under the seas. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Visit Williamsburg. In Williamsburg, Virginia, there's never too much of a good thing. Whether you're a foodie, a golfer, a history buff, a shopaholic, an outdoor enthusiast, or a thrill seeker, you'll find what you came for here and more. So ask yourself, what is it you want? Discover Williamsburg and plan your trip at visitwilliamsburg.com.
Welcome back to Novel Conversations. When we left, our characters and the Nautilus were headed to the frozen sea around Antarctica. Gregory?
The Nautilus continues its southern trek approaching Antarctica. Aronnax is astounded by both the beauty of the ice islands and how Nemo can navigate around and through them. It is extremely cold and daylight is dwindling in mid-March.
After a few days, they encounter a massive iceberg with no way around it in sight. Also, ice is freezing behind them, so the vessel appears to be caught. Nemo argues that the Nautilus can proceed under the iceberg, although they risk running out of air. They estimate that it will take 40 hours to cross the pole and descend.
Several times as they begin to rise, they strike the bottom of the iceberg, and Aronnax begins to get nervous. He sleeps fitfully, and when he wakes, the ice has grown thinner. At 6 a.m. on March 19th, Nemo proclaims that the sea has opened.
Nemo, Aronnax, Conseil, and 2 others set out for an island. proving that the South Pole exists as a landmass, not just a floating iceberg. Aronnax lets Nemo be the first out of the boat, the first human to set foot on this ground. Nemo claims the South Pole as his own and unfurls a black flag bearing a gold N. 6 months of darkness begin.
In the middle of the night, Aronnax is awakened by a shock, and everyone soon realizes that the Nautilus has struck ice and lays on its starboard side, motionless. Nemo reveals that an iceberg has turned over and one of the blocks has struck their vessel.
With the pumps running, they right themselves, but still trapped between the blocks of ice. When they feel another shock, Nemo confirms that their course is barred in every direction.
The situation intensifies. The vessel and all on board are prisoners of ice. The Nautilus has been underwater for 36 hours and only has 48 more hours of air in its reservoirs. The only way out is for the crew to dig out the ice wall in their diving suits.
Aronnax panics when he learns that they only have 1 day of air remaining. The crew continues to take turns digging. Their suits offered more oxygen than inside the submarine. Inside the vessel, they experience symptoms of oxygen deprivation. Only 2 yards remain between the Nautilus and the surface, and the crew is dizzy and suffering.
Nemo decides to try to break through with the force of the submarine itself. It first dives and then rises with force. In the meantime, Aronnax passes out, but Conseil and Land give him the last drops of air from their breathing apparatus. The Nautilus breaks through the ice, and at the last minute, the air rushes in.
Aronnax, Conseil, and Land are gulping fresh air on the platform while all the others are below. Aronnax thanks his friends for saving his life and says that he is forever in their debt.
By March 31st, they are at Cape Horn. Again, Aronnax enjoys observing and cataloging the flora and fauna as they realize they are headed into the Atlantic. Nemo is absent as the Nautilus speeds northward, too far from shore for them to plot an escape. They pass the mouth of the Amazon River and the equator.
The Nautilus makes its way to the Caribbean by April 20th. Nemo continues to be absent, which concerns Aronnax, who works on his journal, his notes, and his observations.
As he, Conseil, and Land discuss the legends of the colossal squid of the region, one of these monsters appears at the window. An enormous beast with a parrot's beak and long tentacles. 7 more pulps chase the Nautilus until it stops in the water.
Nemo appears and explains that one of the squids has gotten tangled in the engine blades and that they must fight them man to beast with hatchets and Land's harpoon. The vessel has surfaced, so the men fight the beasts from the platform. When a tentacle grabs a crew member, Nemo hacks off the arm with an axe, and the squid ejects a stream of black ink, which blinds the men.
The crew member is lost in the confusion. When the men recover, the squids are still upon them, and one grabs Land. Again, Nemo steps in and saves him. The pulps, finally defeated, disappear into the sea, and Nemo cries at the loss of one of his men.
Aronnax reads his account of the squid attack to his friends. Nemo remains sullen and absent, and the Nautilus floats without any movement until May 1st, when the vessel resumes its northerly course.
Land asks Aronnax to ask Nemo when they might leave. Land is losing patience after 7 long months in captivity. Reluctantly, Aronnax goes to Nemo's cabin, where Nemo shows him a manuscript, written by him, that contains the story of his life, to be shut in a waterproof case and tossed into the sea by the last survivor of the Nautilus. Nemo flatly refuses to release the 3 men and orders that they never discuss the topic again. Aronnax informs the others of Nemo's decision.
A hurricane approaches and hits on May 13th. Instead of descending, Nemo stays on the surface. He ties himself to the platform while the wind and waves rage. At midnight, when the storm has subsided, he returns to the inside of the submarine and orders that the vessel descend below the agitated waters.
To Land's great disappointment, the storm blew the Nautilus away from New York City and an opportunity to escape. The men spot the electric cable that engineers built to relay telegrams from Europe to North America, an enterprise that has twice failed.
While Aronnax muses on the history of the cable, now covered with shells, they near the British Isles. Nemo remains aloof, and the Nautilus strangely circles in the water with its captain taking measurements with his sextant. When they spot a large steam vessel, Nemo announces, "It is here." The Nautilus descends and rests on the ocean floor beside a shipwreck.
Nemo emerges from his solitude and recounts the history of the unfortunate ship, the Marseillais, which fought bravely and often. When it faced certain defeat, the captain ordered it to be sunk with all of its men on June 13th, 1794, exactly 74 years before this day. The French had changed its name to the Avenger, a detail that Nemo relishes.
Aronnax comes to realize that Nemo is motivated by a hatred, either monstrous or sublime, which time could never weaken. Aronnax sees this feeling manifested in the way Nemo looks and speaks, watching the glowing wreck of the Avenger. The Nautilus surfaces and land spots an approaching warship.
Aronnax surmises that the ship is searching for what everyone now knows is a submarine. Land wants to escape and waves a handkerchief as a signal, but an angry Nemo appears and stops him cold.
Nemo unfurls his black flag as the Nautilus takes a shot. Nemo orders the 3 captives below and says that he will sink the approaching ship. The Nautilus speeds away with the ship chasing. Nemo yells, quote, "I am the law and I am the judge. I am the oppressed and there is the oppressor." Nemo then reveals that he has lost his entire family and country and hates what this ship represents. Through the night, they watch the ship approach, and then they flee, again and again.
The captives plan to jump from the Nautilus in daylight, but the submarine descends before they do. The Nautilus rams the ship underwater, tearing a hole in its side. They watch as the ship sinks and explodes, leaving a dead crew in the waters as even the masts disappear. Nemo, filled with hatred, goes to his room. The scene ends with Nemo in front of the portrait of his wife and children, sobbing.
Aronnax is haunted by the scene he has just witnessed and horrified at Nemo's dreadful retaliation. The Nautilus continues through the English Channel and northward. Neither Nemo nor his crew appears. Land is desolate and silent.
The ship is almost always underwater. 2 weeks pass. One night, Land proposes that they flee that very night at 10, and Aronnax agrees. Anxious yet resolved, Aronnax waits in his room for the appointed time, torn between having a final conversation with Nemo or not, thinking back over the entire journey on the Nautilus.
As the time draws near, Aronnax hears Nemo playing his organ and worries that he will encounter Nemo as he flees. As Aronnax leaves, he sees Nemo with his arms crossed, saying, "Almighty God, enough! Enough!"
As Aronnax, Conseil, and Land meet on the platform to escape, they hear an awful noise. It is the maelstrom of the Norwegian coast. The captain has steered the vessel there, voluntarily or involuntarily. As the vessel swirls in the storm, Land tells them to hold on to the Nautilus. As Aronnax's head strikes metal, he loses consciousness.
Aronnax, Conseil, and Land are in a hut on Norway's Lofton Isles. They do not know what happened to the Nautilus or to Nemo. In 10 months, they traveled 20,000 leagues, and Aronnax has his manuscript to attest to the wonders they beheld and the horrors they witnessed. He quotes Ecclesiastes, "That which is far off and exceeding deep, who can find it out?" and answers that only he and Nemo have the right answer.
And readers, just that quickly, just that surprisingly, our story ends. We don't know what happened to Nemo. We don't know what happened to the Nautilus. We don't really even know how these 3 men got onto the land and into this hut, but that's the end of our story. Now let's take a final break and then head into our last segment where I'd like to ask the 2 of you to share a moment or a character or perhaps a quote that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. We'll be right back.
Dreaming of a better sleep? Tossing and turning is not your destiny. And Ollie is here to help. Ollie invites you to sink into sweet, sweet slumber to improve your mental and physical health and overall wellness. More than just melatonin, Ollie's ingredients help you unwind your mind for a delightfully dreamy drift off. Sleep is on the way at Ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
Welcome back. All right, Katie, Gregory, before our break, we ended our story, and now I'd like to ask the 2 of you to share a moment or a character or perhaps a quote that we really haven't had a chance to talk about yet. Katie, do you have something for us?
I do. In our conversation, we've completely left out all of the scientific information that Aronnax and Conseil and Nemo himself give us throughout the novel, and I found myself falling into these very calm moments of just scientific identification of animals and plants and all the wonderful things they see. And then all of a sudden, something exciting would happen, which is kind of what it would be like if you were on a submarine and your days just kind of floated on. And then all of a sudden, you were encountering a giant squid.
Yeah, for the listener, I kind of mentioned earlier that it reminded me of the moment in Forrest Gump when Bubba is just naming every type of shrimp dish that he knows. That's kind of what it feels like at times, where they're just listing every type of crab and genus and species as they catalog. It definitely relaxes you, and also it surprises you when something else happens.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike the Forrest Gump descriptions of all the various ways to cook and make shrimp, both Aronnax and Conseil go into genus, kingdoms, related species. I mean, they give us scientific details. To me as a reader, perhaps even a little bit too much. But Gregory, do you have something you want to share?
Well, I don't want to steal thunder, so
steal away.
On that note, I read the foreword. I always read the foreword. And it was a very small description about Jules Verne's life and about how he was, very well brought up and went to study at school, and his father wanted him to come back and be a lawyer. And he decided, no, I want to write. I want to do these things. And the whole book just kind of felt like a letter to his parents being like, I might not be a lawyer, but I look at all the stuff I know. I'm going to write 400 pages about all the stuff I know. And so, yes, at times it seemed excessive. Like I was being mansplained the ocean for a very long time.
And I'll just continue to jump on your statements as well. I did get a bit of a feel that Jules Verne was showing off. I guess I didn't think about him showing off for his dad. But he wanted us to know how much he knows about all of these, as you said, the species, the flora and the fauna of the sea. And again, that's part of what I wanted to bring up. I was joking earlier that if we took out all the descriptions of the flora, all the descriptions of the fauna, all the descriptions of the science, we'd have a novella instead of this 400-page novel that we worked our way through. But it is fascinating, maybe in smaller doses, but to learn some of what we learned about the geography of the oceans, about the flora and the fauna, I did find that illuminating.
Yeah, well, even with that, I found myself getting told too much, but also not getting enough information. Like it's one thing to hear about what is out there versus what is it doing out there. I wanted to know more about the things he was seeing, and it seemed like he was so busy listing things that he lacked the descriptive nature of.
Well, he's a naturalist.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Good points. And I would have enjoyed more information about the crew. We talked about how we don't know how many crew they were, where they came from, what their attraction to Nemo or the sea was. And I would have wanted perhaps a little bit more of that and less about the fish that had 14 fins.
Right.
But anyway, guys, really great stuff. Certainly been a great conversation, and this is a good way to end our conversation about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Katie, Gregory, I do want to thank both of you for coming in and having this conversation with me today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Of course.
Always a pleasure.
I'm Frank Lavallo, and you've been listening to Novel Conversations. Thanks for listening to Novel Conversations. If you're enjoying the show, please give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Instagram at Novel Conversations. Follow us to stay up to date on upcoming episodes and in anything else we've got in the works. Thanks to our readers today, Katie Porchile and Gregory James. Our sound designer and producer is Noah Fouts, and Grace Sienna Longfellow is our audio engineer. Our executive producers are Bridget Coyne and Joan Andrews. I'm Frank Lavallo. Thank you for listening. I hope you soon find yourself in a novel conversation all your own.
I'm Ken Harbaugh, host of Burn the Boats from Evergreen Podcasts. I interview political leaders and influencers, folks like award-winning journalist Soledad O'Brien and conservative columnist Bill Kristol, about the choices they confront when failure is not an option. I won't agree with everyone I talk to, but I respect anyone who believes in something enough to risk everything for it. Because history belongs to those willing to burn the boats. Episodes are out every other week wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast was produced with the support of the Ohio Motion Picture Tax Credit and in partnership with the Ohio Development Services Agency.